Welcome back to the show, everybody. I am Ibrahim, and today I'm joined by Chris Lipp. Chris is Professor of Management Communication at Tulane University. He has written several books on persuasion and personal power. And one of his books, one of my favorite, is The Science of Personal Power. Chris has been featured in Harvard Business Review, Forbes, and Newsweek. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Chris, the topic, personal power, is so broad. It is also complex. How did you end up writing and being so involved with this topic?
I think a lot of people misunderstand what power is, first off, right? We tend to think about things like dominance. And so there's this whole branch of leadership, which is about servant leadership versus dominant leadership and all these things. My angle was communication. And I studied persuasion. Then I wrote a few books on persuasion, including The Startup Pitch, which helps founders really pitch themselves. And what I found with communication was twofold. Number one is that when you teach communication skills, I'll just be clear, it just wasn't super satisfying all the time how much I was doing it. I teach at a university and stuff because it doesn't really touch the core of a person, right? It's a skill set. I think there's more that we communicate when just our words when we're communicating. And so that's really leads to kind of the second reason, which is when you actually look at what makes successful communication, it has a lot more to do with than just tactics and strategies. Mm-hmm. We can, for example, you can take somebody who is a salesperson and they know all the techniques and stuff, but for some reason, sometimes when they just feel confident, they just get, they just succeed, they close the deal. And so there's this fuzzy word, confidence. I always, ask my students at university, what do you think confidence is and where does it come from and stuff? But it just goes to show that there's something behind our words that has a lot more impact than the words themselves. And the science, what is called personal power, that really studies that.
Mm-hmm. What is personal power?
Personal power is a belief in our own capability to create impact. So it's a belief, it's an unconscious belief, and one it's very similar to self-esteem. And when we have a belief that we can create impact, we speak in a certain way that's very different than if we don't have a strong belief about that. And the words we use, the way we speak, the way we hold our boundaries, all change. And as a result of that, we tend to be much more persuasive, much more leaderly, much more, people would say, confident and trustworthy.
So it's related to self-esteem, basically, right?
In some ways, you could say personal power is one of the foundations of self-esteem, 100%.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so is it an internal factor, or is it something externally?
Well, so if we're going to get jumping right into power, I think one of the biggest challenges people face with their personal power is seeking it externally. So through example, for external validation. And the way this shows up, I think, in people's careers is we tend to work with people in a way where we're trying to get them to like us. This desire for likability in order for our colleagues to work with us, right? And if they don't like us, they won't work with us. And so we sometimes bend over backwards even to seek their validation at some level so that we can succeed at our own job. Even our boss, particularly our boss, right? How much do you want your boss to like you so that you get the promotion or at least you don't get fired? Ironically, though, it is in the very validation seeking that we are most likely to underperform and to not be supported. And so one of the biggest challenges, I think, for somebody who's developing their personal power is they have to take the very anxiety-producing step of stepping away from seeking liking and stepping into building relationships through respect. And respect is not, being hard or soft. It has nothing really to do with, it has nothing to do with that. It has nothing to do with dominance or servant leadership. It has a lot more to do with, again, this belief in how much power do we think we have in the world? And when we feel like we have a lot of power, we act much more goal-focused. We're much more open to also working with other people towards goals versus being consumed with comparing ourselves, whether we're better or worse, or trying to vie for power in some way. Those are not powerful behaviors.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like this is not just applicable in our careers, but also when it comes to having friends or when we're dating somebody as well. We can almost feel it when somebody's trying too hard to get our approval.
Oh, yes, 100%. I mean, every relationship, there is a power dynamic, and healthy relationships have certain features about that doesn't require one partner to be less powerful than the other. And you see this particularly in romantic relationships. You can have romantic relationships where you don't respect your partner. I've seen marriages dissolve where somebody, recognizing their partner is losing attraction for them, bends over backwards to be approved of by their partner, and that only speeds up the demise of that relationship, because what they're really doing is they're giving away their power, and in the process of giving away their power, they're giving away their attraction, which is unfortunate. In this downward spiral.
Why is it not attractive to try hard, and why does it turn us off?
Well, it's not about trying hard or not. It's about the reason for trying. So if you're genuinely interested in somebody, and for example, you're chasing somebody, you're dating, that can be a huge turn on. But if you're approval seeking, meaning you're trying to chase them because you want to feel better about yourself, you need something from them, right? Right there's the real trick. If you need something from the other person, then your chasing of them is not for them, it's for you. And and there's a myriad way that we communicate that through our body, through our tone, and through the words we choose, that people can read our power and read what's really going on there. And so then they will judge us as weak or strong.
So it's not about chasing. It's more about that I want them to approve of myself, and I want to get something out of that relationship.
You're absolutely right. In fact, the definition, kind of the simplest definition I've ever got that contrasts a high power person versus a low power person. High power people are focused on their own goals. Low power people are focused on the approval of others. Period.
Wow.
Right. And so if you're, let's say you're in this position right now. I don't know. You're some listeners here, but maybe you're going through a tough time in your relationship, and you're scared. I mean, who wouldn't be scared if the relationship was starting to teeter? And if you react to anxiety and you try to seek approval of your partner by doing things like buying them flowers and stuff, for approval seeking, you're actually going to appear maybe a little less weak, or a little more weak. But let's say you do those same actions. You're setting up, dates out, you're buying flowers, but you're doing it because you care about the relationship and you want to demonstrate the relationship as an important goal for you. You will do those same behaviors with a different energy that makes all the difference in attraction.
So what I hear you say is people pick up on that energy, on your intention.
Yes.
That is fascinating.
And so one of the things, I just can kind of riff off this a little bit. I think one thing that a lot of us today misunderstand about power, and why it's a relatively new field, is that people tend to look at our goal of it being an action, or winning versus losing. Let's say we want to demonstrate that we've had a work success and we want to avoid failure. But what's very fascinating about the research on personal power is what you do, just like buying roses, has a lot less to do with the actual action, and it has a lot more to do with the motivation behind the action. And this comes out, for example, and when people try to appear for example, one of the most powerful things you can do to show your power to other people is to take accountability. Taking accountability is an affirmation of the power you have in the world. It means I'm responsible for this. And if I'm responsible for this, I have power over this. Conversely, people tend to see, well, I don't want to have failure. So they, rather than assign myself, like, let's say you run a project at work and it fails, right? You might just want to distance yourself from that. Very logical. But here's the problem. If you start to blame the failure of that project on something else, like the client or other colleagues and things, your blame indicates to whomever you're speaking to that that person or those people had power, not you. Because that which affects the success or failure of something is the power. And so when you blame, you're saying, I didn't have any power over this. Somebody else did. And if you do, and there's a lot of research that shows, for example, managers who blame failures on others, including their team or their clients, are seen as much weaker and trusted much less than managers who are like, yeah, that's my failure. I totally own that. Those managers are respected more and trusted more. And I think trust is such an important thing. You think even relationships, trust is so critical. And when you blame, you're saying I have no power over something. And when you say I have no power over something, other people cannot trust you. It just, there's no basis for trust because you literally have no ability to take ownership.
Mm.
You see that?
This is very interesting because in your book you actually write that blame is low power behavior.
100%.
Mm.
There are four horsemen. I call them the four horsemen of personal power. If you want to be powerful, if you want to be one of these people who walk into a room and everybody's like, that guy's a star or that woman's a star, you want to be the person in a relationship, like you're respected, you're loved,
Mm-hmm.
you're valued.
Mm-hmm.
You need to have that personal power. Again, it's a personal quality, and it's what makes people attractive professionally and personally. And there are four horsemen to really destroying your personal power. There are four ways that you can kill it. One, blame. Anytime you blame again, you just show powerlessness. Number two is to react. So if you're reacting to other people rather than focused on your own goals. Three is you got to take action. So people who deliberate too much and they never take action, they're very, chronic procrastinators. They're not seen as powerful because powerful people have action. They take action in the world. So blame, action, reaction. The fourth is proving. Proving is a very low power behavior because it means the other person has the power to evaluate you and they're making the choice. And this is why where we come back to relationships, right? If you're buying flowers and you're trying to prove to your wife, that you're a good person, you're kind of on the losing ground because you're not saying you're strong, you're saying I need approval.
Yeah. So the first one is blame.
Mm.
The second one is reacting.
Mm-hmm.
And in your book, you say, don't react, act.
Yes.
Act instead. And the third one is
inaction. Inaction is the third one.
Inaction. And then we have the fourth one, proving.
Mm-hmm.
Proving. So which one is the most common, you think?
Oh, I think the most common is proving. I think there's a lot of people at work. I coach clients on their communication and their power. A lot of people who are kind of mid-level leaders. So they want to be seen positively by executive leadership. They're also leading, a lot of the team within the organization. So they're in this kind of middle place. And they want to go up into executive leadership. They know there's something different about, executive leadership versus mid-level leadership. And so we go through this. And what I see as one of the biggest barriers, there's a couple, but one of the biggest barriers is there's still people who are operating on being liked. And so they're really burning themselves out. For example, looking at executive leadership and trying to prove how great they are to executive leadership. And then at the same time, they feel that weight to prove that they're good leaders to all the people who report to them and other people around the organization. And that just, they're never really focused on the goal of the organization. They're focused on seeking that approval, which is very tiring, very anxiety producing. It's not a very strong place to put your anchor when it's outside of you. So that's one of the biggest, and we can talk about the other one. The other one happens to be the big picture thinking that many leaders do in visionary behavior.
Oh, you mean see the forest instead of each tree?
Yeah, well, another fascinating psychological discovery about personal power and people who see others as powerful is those who are powerful tend to see the forest from the trees. They're the ones who can really see the big picture, and then they communicate that picture down to everybody who's working under them, which is why they make such great leaders, because they can really see the whole machine and understand how each piece operates together and help each piece operate within that machine. Conversely, the person who's really just focused on one aspect of the organization, for example, marketing, finance, engineering, all of these are necessary and important roles, but what makes a manager in any one of these fields is the ability to step out of just the problem which they're solving and to really get a better perspective of the importance of their role within the larger puzzle of that organization.
Mm-hmm. This is interesting because in your book you talk about, you mention abstract language versus concrete language.
Yes.
How is that related to finding meaning and seeing the vision and communicating that vision?
If you were to speak to an executive or somebody who's above you in leadership, their perspective is naturally bigger, right? You are part of a project, their bigger goals, right? You're a piece in their puzzle and they're a piece in somebody else's puzzle. And the higher you get, the more view you have up the mountain, right? as you say, and you look down at the valley and you can see more how pieces operate to you. You know, imagine like a NASA astronaut who's just outside looking at the Earth. You see the whole planet and you really understand how humans all are connected. But as you go way in, you know, you see nations, you see borders, and then you even see like how your neighbors are different than you, right? Or how some, you know, different political parties. There's a distance, right, that gives you perspective. And so what research has found is that people who tend to be lower power tend to have they're focused very precisely on things in front of them, very concrete issues. Like, we need to get this piece working. You know, imagine a mechanic in a car, like this is not operating. We need to replace, you know, the engine or the starter. Or people who have that kind of granular level, super important. You know, I was an engineer before I moved into communication. And that is what engineering is. Like, you're tackling very difficult, complex technical problems that require a lot of focus. And so there's nothing inherently wrong with having very strong focus. But what differentiates a leader, according to the science and according to the stories that I've collected over the years of executives, is the ability to step back from that technical detail and just see how that is a part of a larger picture within the organization. And this is what science has shown. Science has shown in research in psychology that people who speak more concretely, meaning speaking about, you know, tangible things, are seen as less powerful than those who speak more abstractly. So somebody who speaks about, hey, is it illegal to cross the street on a red light? Let's say you want to just jaywalk across the street, right? Somebody who's talking about the law at that level is not seen as somebody who's as powerful as somebody who's speaking about justice and equality and fairness for every individual within the country. Justice is abstract. A very specific law is very concrete. Both are important, but the person who's seen as more leaderly is the person who can speak and see more abstractly.
I find your book very fascinating, Chris, because it is not just, you know, your experience or only what you think, but it's also backed by research and science.
Yes. In fact, I used the science to create the model. It wasn't, I didn't have opinions. I was like, what does science say? What does the research say?
Yeah. Have you yourself struggled with some of the things you talk about in the book?
Every human, I think, struggles with this. You know, we are, through our various relationships, even throughout a single day, we feel high power sometimes, and we call that confidence. We feel low power sometimes. We call that a little bit of anxiety. Our ability to understand the levers that is creating us to feel more anxious or more confident gives us more power to be one or the other, to really see which is happening. And it seems to me that the default of most people is to kind of be less powerful, more reactionary to the world, more anxious. I think that's why anxiety is such a big problem today around, you know, multiple nations. It's a habit. It's a motivation system. It's a healthy motivation system to keep us, you know, surviving, but it's not a healthy motivation system for us to feel fulfilled or for us to feel in control of our lives and feel ability to influence things.
I guess we can start small by not blaming other things, you know, not blaming the weather, not blaming our relatives, not blaming the boss, not blaming the company, and taking more and more responsibility.
Oh yeah, I mean, you asked me like, how is this working for me? Like, I can tell you in my marriage, like, you know, there are times where I get really upset, of course, right? You just and I'll find myself blaming my wife, and I'm like, you know, and then I'm not always conscious enough in the moment to stop it, but like, you know, because the emotions, I'm so justified feeling this, right? But after I'll be like, wow, like I have to own my reaction, right? Like, we have our triggers, and it's not, other people are not responsible for our emotional triggers. And so if we blame them for our emotions, we are giving away our power over our own selves, which I think is so detrimental and so hurtful to the other person. And so in my life, one of the things I've gotten in a habit of is, you know, I'll try to stop myself if I'm noticing I'm starting to blame. I'll be like, no, this is not about me or her. This is about having a healthy relationship, right? Focus on the goal rather than on right or wrong. And if I don't, you know, if my emotions are too hot, then I just, you know, I'm getting in a habit of apologizing more.
I'm sorry. Two powerful words. I'm sorry.
Yeah, like, we just got into a fight a week ago, and the next morning, it was, I still think it was her fault. But, like, but the next morning I was like, yeah, but I did not have to have the reaction I had because
Yeah.
I did not need to get upset. And I was so upset it kind of like ruined the rest of my night. It's so silly, right?
Yeah.
Humans are so silly. And,
Yeah.
and I was like, how I responded to her was not her fault at all. That was totally my responsibility. So
Mm,
I apologize for that.
mm. This is very powerful because it shows that you have the ability to actually reflect on your actions. And I think it was Dale Carnegie who once said that people who do most damage are the ones who don't reflect and repeat the same
Mm.
mistakes over and over again. At least reflect, what did I do wrong here? And I find this very interesting, Chris, because you talk about, don't blame,
Yeah,
instead voice your needs.
you could do that. That's a very healthy thing to do in a relationship.
I'm thinking also, if you have a at work, things are not working out for you. Maybe it's a toxic workplace. Maybe you've tolerated some bad behavior from colleagues or from your boss.
Yes.
One way is to actually voice your needs. Tell people what you actually want.
100%. I think that people who get very skillful at communication, one thing that you find is that it's all about the other person, right? It's really focused on the audience. You're trying to sell something, you're trying to inspire somebody, you're really focused on the audience. What gets lost in that sometimes is ourselves. We get so
Mm-hmm.
good at communicating to the needs of other people and meeting their needs in a way that's not necessarily disempowering. We're just effective at reading
Mm-hmm.
the audience. But then we forget, oh yeah, I still need to be in there.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not in there, you do yourself a disservice. I had one person I was coaching, and she was very good at building networks and helping people. Like, she's just a phenomenal star at this. But it wasn't yielding anything for her. And it wasn't meant to yield anything for her. She was doing it because she's a good person. But she's like, these are great opportunities for me to, I'm connecting people, but I'm just getting lost, in the noise. And she found that as she networked, if she started to share her own needs, not just listen to the other person's needs, like, they started popping up with ideas and connecting her. And so it's this back and forth, honoring yourself as you honor the other person. That is the maximum position of power.
So it's not over giving.
Correct. It's, if you look at power as two fundamental expressions, one is serving others, and two is asserting yourself. So when we look at the conundrum of leadership, for example, there's, is it better to be a dominant, hyper masculine leader versus a servant leadership? Well, the answer is it's neither, or it's both. It's really both, because both have been successful. And what makes them successful are not mutually exclusive. They're just different ways of serving others and asserting yourself. And your ability to balance that is what will make you successful. One example from the book that you read is Nelson Mandela. Here's a person who nobody in the world would say was not a servant leader. Nobody in the world, right? But if you look at what he did, he was hyper goal focused. Like, when he would not speak ill of, he would say things that he knew would upset his allies if it was the truth and if it was consistent to his goals. And I'll give you an example. There was a time where he was partnered with Israel, and he was partnered with Libya, I think. So two nations that are diametrically opposed back in the day, and neither side was happy that he was allied with the other for South Africa, right? And so when Libya said, "Hey, you got to stop working with Israel, or we're not going to let you have offices," he's like, "Fine, close our offices." And when Israel said, "Hey, you got to stop working with, I don't understand how you can, work with Libya and all their human rights things," he's like, "I'm not interested in what you think of them. I'm interested in their support for our goal of ending apartheid. He was
Mm.
just so direct. He did so assertive to what he believed was the right thing for his people that he never compromised his values. So he was asserting his values, not his ego. He was asserting his values uncompromisingly, but those values then serve. You see.
Mhm.
I talked to a woman who was on a city council in Texas, and I asked her, she was this Asian mother, older Asian mother, and she said, when I was campaigning, neither the Democrats nor the Republicans. So this is in the U.S., right? Neither the Democrats or the Republicans were supporting me. So they were both the two major political parties were putting candidates against her, and she won. And she won 3 times. She was on her 3rd term when I was talking to her, and I was like, "Dang, you have a lot of support. Can you tell me your motto? Can you tell me why you're so successful?" She said, "Yeah, it's very easy." She said, "I have this motto: I don't care if you like me. I'm here to serve you."
Mm.
It's like,
We need her today in this world, right?
yeah.
We need her. So it's about a balance, asserting yourself as well, not just
Yes.
overgiving and oversharing.
Yes.
Chris, is personal power something you build, or is it something you stop giving or stop giving away?
It's a phenomenal question. It's both. The 4 horsemen of personal power that we talked about, right? There are different ways we can leak our power all the time. And we do it, notice, through our language. It underlies a mindset, which is really the heart of it, but there's a language that we speak. And I think if we can recognize the way we use our words, we start to take control of our own mindset. So we can plug those holes so that we're no longer diminishing our power. There are certainly things we can do to enhance our personal power. One of my favorite psychologists is a guy by the name of Nathaniel Branden, who's considered the grandfather of the self-esteem movement. He lived in the middle of the 20th century. It was mainly his main time of success. And he probably passed away 10 or 15 years ago now, but he describes self-esteem in a way that I would describe personal power as well. He said, your self-esteem is an unconscious computer that is always calculating based on your behaviors, whether to increase or decrease your self-esteem. And you can't get around it. If you lie, you know you lied. And so your self-esteem will actually go down, even if you get total success in the external world. So I really like that, because what he's saying is self-esteem is something you control, but it's not in your direct control. It's your indirect control, right? The way you behave, the way you speak, these things affect your self-esteem. And personal power is the same thing. It's an experience that lives and is calculated through our unconscious mind, but through our consciousness, we can very much trigger it to be more or less powerful.
So even if they don't find out that you've lied, that's going to affect your self-esteem, because you know that I lied. And even if they don't find out, that's going to affect your self-esteem and your personal power.
Well, will it affect your personal power? Probably, if you value honesty. It will certainly affect your self-esteem. The important takeaway is that your power is not outside of you, just like your self-esteem. Your power is not outside of you. It's not whether you succeed or not. It's whether you try and whether you take responsibility for it. For example, they did this really cool study where they asked people to make and I'm going to give you another angle of it, about action. So this is responsibility we know, but action we haven't talked about much. They asked people to come in and they said, hey, what's a big decision that you've been procrastinating on? And it could be like take a job or leave a job or, start or get married or get a divorce, in a relationship. It's like huge decisions. Like, what's a big decision you're procrastinating on making? And everybody kind of knows what they should do, but it's not always pleasant or easy. And so, okay. And then they had them flip a coin. They said, if it turns out heads, you're going to promise yourself and us that you're going to do exactly what you're just going to step out of here and you're just going to do it. No more hesitation. If it's tails, you can do whatever you want. So however many people did the study, right? They all flipped the coins and, half of them got heads, half got tails. They left. And then the experimenters followed up with them later, 6 months later. And they asked them, well, if you flipped heads, did you take action? And, the majority of people, it might've been 80%. I don't remember the exact amount, but the majority of people who flipped heads actually did make the action and did whatever they did. And the majority of tails actually were still procrastinating, And then they said they measured their happiness. And by and large, everybody who had taken action those people who took action were significantly more happy than those people who did not take action.
Mm.
And has nothing to do with whether they took the right action or not, right? Who knows how often it was really the right decision to do something. But it wasn't whether they did the right thing or not. It was taking the action itself that created the sense of happiness, right? It's because my explanation is that they were tapped into their personal power. Personal power gives us optimism, gives us fulfillment, gives us happiness. Tapping into not being their power, for example, long-term chronic procrastination, these things, you're in your low power mindset, which is connected to anxiety and fear and these things. You see, so I think so much, again, it's not about the win or lose, it's about the doing. It's not about the win or the lose, it's about the holding yourself responsible for it. These are where you get your sense of personal power, and this is where people get their sense of trust and respect from you.
So basically, action leads to empowerment.
Yeah, Nike's slogan's the best slogan in the world. Just do it.
Just do it. Do it. Obviously, if you know you should take action and you don't take action, and I've been myself there in that position, it could be an old relationship, it could be not leaving a job, it could be not ending a friendship and so forth. When you're just still in it, I remember just, my sense of self-respect, I kind of lost it at times. When you should leave something, you should move, or you should start over, and you're not doing it. You know what is right for you, but you're still stuck voluntarily. That affects self-esteem and self-respect. So this is important. Action leads to empowerment.
Well, can you think of a specific example and why you didn't take action?
I think I was worried about change. I was worried about change. For example, starting this podcast, I talked about it for years. And my son told me one day, he said, "Dad, I would like to become a basketball player." And I said, "Oh, that's great." He said, "This is my dream. This is what I'm going to do." I said, I'll invest in you. I'll be there for you, but just promise me one thing. He said, "What is it?" I said, "You start and you never give up." And a few weeks later, I was researching a mic for this podcast, and he told me, he said, "Dad, you've been talking about the podcast for a long time." I said, "Well, I know I'll probably start it one day." He said, "Well, you told me to start and to never give up."
Smart son.
And I think he's just afraid of change. I was afraid that, what if I take action and it doesn't work out? And so I took action, and here we are.
There's a certain uncertainty to success or failure, right? When you try something new. I was just talking, for example, to my students a few weeks ago, business students, undergraduate business students. How many of them have imposter syndrome? How many of them have felt like they'd been in a situation where they didn't belong, right? They didn't earn it. Somehow they got in, but they don't deserve it. And every hand in the room went up. I always have them look around to see that they're not alone. They see everybody else's hand. And then I share with them, one of the challenges with imposter syndrome is that you're in a high level of uncertainty. You have essentially stretched your boundaries so far that you're like, wow, how did I end up here? right? And usually it's a good thing. Otherwise you wouldn't be feeling like an imposter. So you're in this new place and you have all this uncertainty. Am I qualified? Do I belong? Right? You don't really know the lay of the land because everything's new. And so you tend to do a few things. Humans tend to do a few things when they feel imposter syndrome. One is they tend to look outside for external validation. Very frightening, right? When you have uncertainty, you start to just ask other people and you're kind of giving away your power. You can see that, right? Because suddenly you're depending on others to make you feel welcome. And another way that's really tragic is either they don't try, this would be your case, and don't try, or when they're in that uncertain imposter syndrome, when they're in that place of uncertainty, sometimes they sabotage themselves. Right? They're in a relationship. They're like, I can't imagine. I could never believe I was with this person, and it's perfect. And then they do something to end, like to destroy the relationship. They sleep with somebody. Like, I can't believe I did that. Right? Like, later on, they just can't understand it, or they quit a job that they were immensely qualified for, but just felt so much anxiety. And I mentioned Nathaniel Branden earlier about self-esteem, and he had another quote. I really like his research. He had another quote, which he said something about the idea that people who are really uncomfortable with uncertainty will sabotage themselves in order to regain the comfort they had playing small. Right. So I think one of the greatest indicators of your power is your ability to stand in the face of uncertainty and not flinch. And how do you do that? Well, one is just straight up grit and tolerance. Okay, that's not a permanent solution, but it's something that definitely is a powerful thing to do. Just things will always work themselves out. Don't sabotage it. But number two is what you did, which is you really had a clean goal that you were working towards. And you didn't know whether success or failure was going to be the outcome, but that was irrelevant to pursuing the goal. And when we think about back to personal power, what differentiates high power from low power people focus on their own goals. Low power people focus on the approval of others. And so if we think we will be paralyzed in low power, right, non-action, we will be paralyzed if we're always concerned with whether other people will approve or like what we're doing. But if we're just like, this is a goal, who knows what's going to happen? That's power.
Yeah.
Even if you feel anxiety in the process, it's powerful because you're not reacting to anxiety.
Yeah, I mean, anxiety is something. Sometimes it's good because so I speak on trust and bias. And I remember when I started off many years ago, I would be on the stage and I guess I was more focused on myself, how I looked on the stage. I was nervous. I was up in my head, and that anxiety before I entered the stage made me actually focused. I prepared probably too much. I was up in my head, yes, but I prepared a lot. Had I not prepared, I'd probably not have made it. So that anxiety served me, but it didn't stop me from going on the stage and falling on my face over and over and over again. But it wasn't perfect in the beginning. And I know that in the beginning, when I was on the stage, I think the audience could feel that I was very anxious and very nervous. And as an audience member, you're a professor. As an audience member, emotions are kind of contagious. If you lose the audience, it's not the audience's fault. It's your fault.
Yes.
And in the beginning, I would basically lose the audience, and because my intention was not right. I was there for myself, and probably because I was too anxious and I was up in my head. But when that shifted, when it was more about the audience, what can I do for them?
Nice.
I'm here for my audience. This is my message. This is my intention. Then things changed. But for things to change, I had to go through that process.
Well, you hit on two great points. I think number one is notice that when we're self-focused, we are really kind of focused on approval, improving ourselves, right? And then when we're other focused, we are generally more goal-oriented, as you said, more focused on the audience. And because we are expanding our boundaries and stepping into something new, there is going to be natural anxiety to that. I can only think of one person in probably the history of mankind that has not had anxiety. It's probably the Buddha. Right? He spent his whole lifetime getting rid of anxiety, and then he succeeded. Yay. That was his life work, was to get rid. The rest of us, poor souls, we have anxiety, but what differentiates the great ones from the powerful people from the non-powerful people is the powerful people don't react to their anxiety. And the powerful people react to their anxiety.
What about tension? Because looking back at my career, I mean, I remember I had a meeting with a client one time, and they asked me, "How much do you charge?" I told them the amount, and the client was just looking at me. It was just a pause, a silence. And I remember I was so uncomfortable with that tension. I filled that silence with, "Oh, well, we can negotiate. I can probably, make a better deal for you." And I've noticed that some powerful people, they're very comfortable with that tension. It might be uncomfortable, but they don't avoid tension. They stay in it, and they deal with tension. How is that connected to personal power?
I love that. I mean, you're absolutely right. They're not reacting to their emotions. They're just focused on the goal. Like, I've spoken my piece. I'm going to weigh here and see what the response is. Right? I'm not going to, if you undercut myself, which I think every person can relate to doing at some point who's in any sort of sales. Because it's like, uh-oh, did I do something wrong? It's approval seeking. Like, this might not work. Your goal can give you whereas when you're focused on a goal, you're going to be focused on you're going to hear what they have to say. You're going to want to know before you before you take next steps.
What happens internally, Chris, when we feel powerless?
When we feel powerless, a part of our brain called the behavioral inhibition system activates, and it is responsible for us seeking protection and safety. And so we will avoid risk, and we will feel. That's why anxiety is one of the primary emotions of this motivational system, because it's to keep us away from risk. Usually the motto of a low power person is "don't rock the boat." Meaning I don't want to do something that's going to cause anybody else to potentially think ill of me. Because we're feeling powerless, we feel other people have power in the world, not us. And so if other people have the power in the world, we need to win their evaluation. And so we're going to feel anxious. We're going to be hypersensitive to what other people think of us. And we're going to try to get them to like us or to approve of us in some way so that we don't feel threatened by them. That's what happens when we feel powerless.
So basically, we don't take risks. We protect ourselves, and we don't rock the boat.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I think one of the challenges, there was a situation that happened in the US last year where 3 university presidents went in front of Congress, the United States Congress. The president of Harvard, can't remember the other 2 universities, but they did not perform well. And so they were really ravaged in the media. And well, it was fascinating about why did they perform well. It was the topic of the conversation was the whole issue going on in the Middle East between Israel and Palestine, and sort of the what it's creating on campus of both sides, talking down to each other, different people from different groups. And so the university presidents in front of the United States Congress were very anti-risk, meaning they were not giving any strong opinions about what they should do. They were hedging their words, saying, well, if this happens, we might do this. We would look into it. No real value statements, no real action statements. And it turned, they were vilified and crucified in the news, and they all I think they all ended up getting fired, or they all were forced to resign, all 3 of them. What was fascinating was 2 of those 3 were coached by a law firm. And when you think about law firms and lawyers are very risk adverse, right? That's sort of, you have a contract. If you ever put together a contract in business, it's all about, reducing risk.
Mm.
And so I make this joke, not to make fun of lawyers or anything, but just lawyers don't make great leaders because their job is to avoid risk, right? And even finance people sometimes have this challenge when in the business I work with and the clients I work with, where they're too focused on the risks, and so they don't lead effectively.
Mm-hmm.
But leadership, when you really, it's from the behavioral approach system. So it's a different motivational mechanism. The brain, it's one that moves towards goals and seeks reward. And that's why it's so positive. That's why it's so optimistic, because it's very positive, forward looking. And when we act from a place of high power, our motto is, it's better to ask forgiveness than permission, meaning just do it. Just do it, and we'll figure out the other stuff later. So that's the kind of challenge with risk. It's healthy in a job where you're a finance person or a lawyer. You have to pay attention to risk. It's a demand of the profession, and it cannot be your only focus. There was I could share like infinite stories, but there's this one story. Tom Cruise was sharing the story with another actor, and the other actor was relaying it. Who is the guy who was in Good Will Hunting? Do you remember the main actor?
No.
How about the talented Mr. Ripley? Same guy? No. These are old movies. Like, sorry, it's like, look at my gray hair. Anyway, other people who know these movies will know who I'm talking about. But that actor was talking about Tom Cruise. He's like, I was talking to Tom Cruise, and Tom Cruise was saying he wanted to do this like stunt that was like really, really not safe. And like, so Tom Cruise was telling the story to him. He's like, oh, the safety guy said we couldn't do it. So I fired the safety guy and got another safety guy, and then we did it. And, safety guy is all about anti-risk. But look at what happens. If you're all about anti-risk when you're trying to do something great, like an organization, you're trying to push forward, you got to be more than just the risk, because the risk is in service to a goal. And so you got to always remember there's that bigger goal, and that's where your power is. So let the goal be dominant over the risk.
This ties back to what you've been talking about today. Be goal oriented, work towards your goals, and part of that is dealing with risk as well, not avoiding risk. This is very interesting, Chris. We've talked about a lot of things here, but one thing I think about is authenticity. There are a lot of things we can do to enhance our power, our charisma, our confidence, and so forth. But what about authenticity? Because you can do some of the things we talk about, but it might still come off as inauthentic. So how can we learn these skills and develop these skills and practice without losing authenticity?
Authenticity is, foundational to personal power. They did research out of UC Berkeley where they found that those who feel more powerful are more authentic, and those who are seen as more authentic are perceived to be more powerful by others. Right? If we think about, ultimately when we're inauthentic, our focus is being liked or approved of by other people. Why else would we be inauthentic? Whereas when we're authentic, we're really self-expression, which is focused on our own goals. But I really like, there's this Jeffrey Pfeffer is this guy who studies, he's written a lot of books and he's at Stanford. So, and his whole thing is don't be authentic. Like authenticity doesn't say it's authenticity is for losers, but he's basically saying it doesn't necessarily serve your highest good when you're seeking power within an organization. So there's this big conundrum, right? Because you've got research that says authenticity is good. And on the other side, you got these experts who are saying authenticity is a risk. And I think that a lot of the conflict around authenticity is that there is no clear definition of what authenticity is. I see authenticity as a self-expression of our own values and goals. So it's communication or behavior in pursuit of our own values and goals. And the contrast to that is somebody who, let's say that you're somebody who's low power, who's very distracted by other people's opinions. They're always thinking, does this person like me? Does that person like me? those would not necessarily be their own goals. They would just be seeking approval, which is not a high power goal. It is the definition of a low power behavior. So why am I bringing all this up? Because people confuse authenticity with transparency. Transparency is what you're feeling right now in the moment. Like, let me just share my unfiltered stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's not authenticity. You can have a lot of thoughts that are not who you are or represent your values or goals, like errant, impulsive thoughts. Is that who you are? I wouldn't say that's who you authentically are, So don't be transparent. It's unnecessary and even irrelevant in a lot of contexts. Be authentic. Authentic means look at what goal of yours is best served in the situation you're in, and how can you best serve that goal through your behavior and communication.
Okay, you need to say that again. That sounds good.
Authenticity is looking at the situation you're in and determining what is your most important goal for that situation, and how can you best pursue that goal through your behavior and communication in that situation. Then you are being authentic and true to who you are, which is your values and goals.
And your goal can change from situation to another situation, depending the circumstances, the person you're dealing with, and the situation itself.
Yeah, and I'll give you an example to make it real. Let's say that you're at a sales meeting with some client, and you're like, boy, this guy's really a real jerk, right? And you just like, if you misunderstood authenticity as transparency, you'd just be like, I want to be authentic. Hey, you're being a jerk. I don't like this at all. I don't like you. You need to go shove it. Can we close a deal? Done. You capsize the whole thing. So you can see, but you're like, what? Those are what I really feel, Chris. Shouldn't I be authentic? Shouldn't I express that? Well, it's obvious from any kind of like common sense that you shouldn't. But I would argue that by not expressing it, you're being more authentic. And here's why. Because the whole reason you're in that sales meeting is to earn your income in your profession. And the whole reason you're doing that is to take care of your kids, your wife, to own a house, like huge, important goals that are infinitely more important than your feelings in that moment, you see? And so if you say, I'm not going to do that, I'm not going to say that stuff, I'm going to close this deal, and I'm going to use the communication and behaviors necessary to close this deal in order for that bigger goal, you are being 100% authentic to you, right? Where that would be untrue is only if it's doing for not something like a real value. Like if you're just like, I want ego and I want money and it's all about me, which is actually, if you really dig deep, it often comes from insecurity and can be like, ultimately you're trying to seek approval at some level by being very rich or whatever, right? And so you have to be aware that there are, some low power behaviors masquerade as goals. But but that would not be the same thing as being authentic.
Okay,
So,
and it's probably also connected to self-esteem.
Yeah, 100%. Anyway, yeah, I probably gave too much different details there, but the main point is you can see that coming back to self-esteem. I mean, because self-esteem seems to be something we're talking about today, right? Nathaniel Brown. Another thing he said, I tell you, my favorite psychologist, right? That's why I know all this stuff. Another thing he said was, you are in integrity with yourself when you are pursuing your highest goal, even if you're sacrificing a lower value to do it, or your highest value. So for example, if you never want to sacrifice your values, but if you have to sacrifice a value, you always sacrifice the value that means less of the two, right? Let's say you have to be honest, or you have to protect a human being from getting, murdered. You're going to lie. You're going to lie all day long to protect that life. Like and that he would say is full integrity. Because integrity is not just being in accordance with your goals, it's being in accordance with the hierarchy of your goals as well. So the higher value. And so then that's authentic. You would not be authentic if you were honest in that moment, because you are betraying your highest value. And so the same thing is true with authenticity in any moment. Is it worth it to you to tell this guy off? And then you don't feed your son, you get fired? Like, no, not any day of the week is that appropriate.
That's probably being stupid, I would say.
Stupid.
This is awesome. Chris, have you seen people misuse what you teach?
I don't see how people can misuse it if they truly understand it.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen people play fun games, like they take a workshop, for example, and then, executive MBA students, and they go home to their spouse and they play this power dynamic, who's got the more power, right? And they're having fun with that. Trying to see, but anytime it's competitive, anytime it's comparative, it is no longer personal power. It's external. And so it starts to be something different.
Mm.
You can't, and I think one of the beautiful things about personal power is that many of the behaviors that correlate to your own personal power correlate to you empowering others.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's this sort of synergy that I think is built into the mind, which is just based on evolution, that it makes sense that tribes that were successful had the most empowered members. It didn't have one member on top and everybody else was disempowered. It was the whole team. Right? So, and then we see that it's just very, very clear. For example, people who are empowered hold themselves accountable, but you know what else they do? They hold other people accountable. So they're the leaders who they're not afraid of holding others accountable. And when they hold others accountable, it's uncomfortable for that other person, but that other person then is empowered because that other person is not forced to face the fact that they actually have power over the situation and could do something rather than blame it away. And so it's an uncomfortable, but it's a real way of empowering other people. You see that? And that's almost all the things about empowerment really follow that model.
Yeah. So what if, someone feels powerful internally, meaning personal power, but they keep getting dismissed externally? What should they do?
I would say that's unlikely because the more you convey personal power through your communication, the more you're noticed and the more people take heed of you.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost like a person with the issue you're saying about not being noticed or being dismissed. What they need to do is to increase their personal power, and then they will be seen.
Mm-hmm.
The opposite of what you said is actually the more common trait in society, where we have people who have very low personal power, but have extensive external power. And so, and there's research on this. And what happens is if you have a lot of external power, but you have low internal power, these are the people who tend to be the people we dislike most, like the dominators, the people who are really nasty with their power. There was, one case of a story I heard where an executive at a large energy company, he was just sitting in, they were having a team meeting, and he just looked at one of the junior guys. He's like, just out of the blue, he said, I could just fire you right now if I wanted to. Right. And the whole room did a double take, what? And the more observant people, everybody in that room was shocked, but the more observant people was like, that guy must be really insecure. Why would anybody ever say that to a junior person? So I think that's the real struggle, is that those people with power are disempowered on the inside.
Because you don't have to be loud and you don't have to be rude. But I feel that, looking at our leaders in the world today, it seems that we elect our leaders, and some of our leaders are loud. They thump their chest, and they might tell you exactly what they're thinking, and even if they hurt other people. What's happening?
It's not whether they hurt somebody or not. Personal power is not correlated to the personality trait of affability. What's the agreeableness is called. And so it's not it's not how nice or mean you are that correlates to personal power. It has no correlation. So you can be a total jerk, or you can be a real softy. You still have personal power. My take is a little bit wider. First off, populist leaders who gain a lot of attention today, they do often speak very powerfully within crowds. And in a lot of cases, this is totally off topic, but populism is often correlated to having constituency that feels very disempowered. And so they're looking for a leader with just raw power in order to feel like they're heard. And so there's disempowered people finding somebody who just has a lot of external power and who can command others so that they can feel like their needs are met through this person.
Okay, so it has nothing to do with personal power.
It may or may not, but what's important is, well, what I can see from my angle is that those people who maybe meet this criteria that you're thinking about, they do have the right words. They do have the right words of their communication. Whether they actually have the mindset to back those words or whether it's just a strategy, I can't tell you.
Yeah. I promised myself no politics today. Is there something I should have asked you that you're thinking, man, Ibrahim should have asked me about this?
Coming back to something we talked at the very beginning, and something I see in so many of my students and my clients, the biggest change that you can make into stepping from where you are in your personal power today to a higher level is to let go of the validation seeking and to really focus on the goal. Whether that's at work to build relationships with your colleagues or your higher level ups, whether that's in your relationship, whether that's with your friends or a club or a group or a team. Taking the plunge of stepping away, saying, I'm no longer going to focus on what other people think of me. I'm just going to focus on the goals that I have or that I share with these people, and to do my best efforts to communicate my service towards those goals is going to be not just a game changer for you in that context, that situation, but it would be a life changer in your experience. You'll be plugging into yourself. And so as the city councilwoman said, if you want to be of service to the world, make your motto, my goal is not, I'm not here to serve. I'm not here to be liked by you. I'm here to serve you.
I'm not here to be liked. I'm here to serve.
And everybody will like you as a consequence of that.
Because you're not seeking validation. Chris, where can people find you?
You can go to my website, speakvalue.com. Speakvalue.com. It's just as it sounds. But for those of you who are interested in this work, definitely grab my book, The Science of Personal Power. I spent several years writing it and just summarizing all of the research I could find in psychology. So it really is a comprehensive analysis of status and personal power. And I think it's the best book for really helping you. I've got a lot of exercises in there that you can use to strengthen your own power in the process. It's not meant just to give you new skills. It's meant to change you to feel more confident in life.
The Science of Personal Power. Get yourself a copy. It's a great book. Chris, I always have this last question that I ask my guests. And if you could give us only one piece of advice, only one of advice for a better, more meaningful life, what would it be?
Know your values.
All right, Chris, know your values. Thank you so much for what you do. We really need it. And I've read your book, and what really struck me is when you said that powerful people are meaning makers. Powerful people are meaning makers. Meaning makers. And the advice you just gave us today are phenomenal. Please come back again. It would be nice to have you back here.
This is a real pleasure. I really appreciate these questions.
Well, thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Take care.